right, welcome everybody to the Tuesday, January 20th, 2026 Haldane Board of Education workshop meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance is to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
President Clements?
Here.
Vice President Valentine? Here. Trustee Clementson?
Here.
Trustee Cupper? Here. Trustee McNall?
Here.
And student member Ruggiero?
Here.
I don't believe we have any changes to the agenda, so may we have the recommended action for the agenda?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May we have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. So after today, our next meeting is going to be a business meeting on Tuesday, February 3rd, here in the middle school, high school library at 7 o'clock. And I just have a few comments. First of all, I think the whole board probably wants to thank all the students and community members who if either reached out or attended the meeting, our last meeting, to talk about how important the tennis team is and supporting the tennis team. And I do want to say, as long as I've been on the board, we and the district overall have been really committed to supporting students when they have a really strong interest, like we're seeing with the tennis team. And I think that's certainly our plan this time around as well. And I think the community will be hearing more as we move into the budget season. Also, I'm going to guess I'm not going to be the only one tonight that thanks the maintenance team for the phenomenal work that they've done. I spent the whole weekend thinking about them and our interim facilities director and Dr. Duffy, knowing that even though it was a long weekend and a holiday, that making sure that the campus was ready to be opened was something that was on not just on people's minds, but that people were really doing the hard work to do that. So that's much appreciated. And then I guess the last thing I want to say is, even though budget planning, I know, has begun months ago on the part of the superintendent and the business manager and the administrative team, tonight really kicks off the board's active role in making sure that and approving a budget that will go before the community on the third Tuesday in May. I don't know that date off the top of my head. And, overseeing the budget's development and weighing in on it and really ultimately approving the budget that goes before the public is really among the board's most important responsibilities. And I know, or I anticipate that I speak for all of us when I say that we look forward to collaborating with the district leadership to do that in a way that really supports the best interests of our students. So those were my comments.
Okay. I'll keep mine brief because we do have a couple of presentations tonight, but to piggyback on some comments already shared, big shout out and thank you to our amazing maintenance crew. Again, they came in over the weekend, they navigated snow and ice. I had probably hourly updates from our interim director of facilities at certain points, and so we could open up safely today. They're just an amazing crew. Very, very grateful for them. Wanted to thank Mr. Elder before he begins his great presentation tonight on behalf of our administrative team and all the work of our teachers. We're going to hear a little bit more about our state assessments. And I really just want to acknowledge, having given this presentation for many years in the past, Josh is really tackling this in a very thoughtful way in terms of looking at the data, but really also what's the story it's telling us, what questions are we thinking through, what resources are we using to support our students. So I really just want to thank him and our administrative team for all of their ongoing work. Of data is something we use on a daily basis, and I'm looking forward to hearing the presentation tonight. And as Peggy already mentioned, budget season officially is beginning tonight, so we're looking forward to our discussion on the parameters a little bit later. And last but certainly not least, we almost had someone in the audience wearing a costume to promote this. But this Friday night, we're having the elementary musical of Finding Nemo, and there may be someone in the audience who might be up on stage, perhaps doing some of the acting and maybe singing. I don't know, but we are looking, I'm just making up rumors now as we go. Minimal speaking. Okay. I'm looking forward to my first elementary musical. So far, I've loved what I've seen. So last spring, I saw middle school. I saw high school in the fall. Now I get to see elementary. So it'll be full circle come Friday night. If you're all free, Friday night at 7 p.m., it'll be the hot ticket of all things Haldane. So looking forward to that as well.
Just put it on my calendar.
Put it on your calendar. I'll save you a seat. Okay.
All right. So, Luke, what do you have for us tonight?
Hope everybody had a nice Christmas, New Year's. I guess Dr. Duffy stole my part about an email. I'll jump right to the high school and the BOCES process this year, which is well underway and kind of nearing its end stages, I'll say. It started November 15th when sophomores were given a presentation in all of our English classes. We took an assessment called a career cluster, which I don't know if you guys all can see. This is what the career cluster looks like. The assessment was on your computer, and it asks you a lot of questions like, are you good with nature? Do you like dogs? Do you like working with your hands? Things like that to try and find careers that you might be interested in that you might not know you're interested in based on the categories. And every student took that. And then there was the BOCES information night, which was held for freshmen and sophomores on Thursday, November 20th, followed by the BOCES Tech Tour, which a lot of sophomores signed up for. I myself went on the trip. It was great. I went for a police officer, so things like that. I got to see a police simulator, go through some simulations police officers train for. Drunk goggles, which everyone liked, as well as fingerprinting. I mean, it takes you through different classrooms, kind of things, classes you'll need to take, even though it's not your main course, but it's helpful for it. So I went into a teaching classroom, educational, and I learned how they work with kids, how to work with young kids. And then after that, I went to a firefighter course to learn all about that, which was really cool. And then the BOCES application info session for students who liked the tour and wanted to continue with BOCES next year, which was on December 9th. And then the BOCES application meetings for one-on-one meetings with Ms. Heinzman. So 10th grade students applying to BOCES can kind of get a feel for that. Moving on to sports, I guess. Boys basketball and girls basketball have their senior nights, I believe, this week and next week. Boys basketball just got back from their trip to Springfield, Massachusetts for a tournament there they played in. They did not win their games, but they played against good competition and had a great time. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, actually, I would just to build on the senior nights. That was I think it was in Mr. Cunningham's report. And one of the things that Tom and his assistant Angela have been doing is letting the board know when the senior nights are, which I really appreciate. And so I do the girls' senior night is next Monday night, and the boys' senior night is, I want to say, is on actually not until the 11th.
Right, a little later.
Yeah. So yeah. So yes. But those are great. Those are great events to go to because you get to see the kids, students and their parents. So thanks very much, Luke. Yeah. That's good to remind us about those kinds of events.
Really quickly, your sister plays.
Yes. She is a senior, so one day I will be there.
Bring her flowers.
I don't know. I'll let my parents walk out with her.
That's great. Nice tradition. All right. So it's a workshop meeting, and so now it's time for our workshop presentation, which is a presentation from Josh Elder on date assessment data and more.
And more.
Good. You cleared the whole.
This is how
Make yourself comfortable. Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Duffy, the board, thank you again. And my colleagues tonight, thanks. I'm here for my yearly New York State required update on New York State assessments and our results. So again, that joking aside, I do think it's always been great working with my colleagues around this, as well as talking with the Board of Education the last few years, to be talking about this presentation in a way that is informative in terms of presenting the numbers in terms of a mandate, but what is a little bit more behind it, kind of the insights as to behind that. So I begrudgingly sometimes get up here and joke around the numbers, but there's a nice story here to tell within this, right? So jumping right in when we talk about New York State assessments, the first band we talk about is grades 3 through 8, which are in English language arts and in mathematics, and then in science. And science is now in grades 5 and grade 8, and that was a shift. The tests were administered in 2 sessions over 2 days. They're aligned to the New York State learning standards. They act as kind of this standardized summative assessment that's provided by New York State as a way to benchmark districts and students against those standards. And they're developed and sent off and scored down at the RIC, and we outsource that scoring, and then they come back, and then we get those scores sometime mid-summerish or so is how they come back to us, and they go through a process of being verified in a bunch of ways before they are made public onto the New York State data website, which all of the information that you'll see tonight is from that website, is from that public kind of filtered through session, so to speak. Just a couple of things I'd like to talk about over the last few years is just a little bit of being mindful of comparing with the numbers. I think that since the COVID year of 2019-20 and the years subsequent afterwards, New York State has had to send out memos based upon student participation after post-COVID worlds, namely 2021, 2022, 2020, 2021, actually. Just kind of cautioning districts around the numbers and ways of using that information, basically because of the number of students who did not take the exams during that time period. So that went on for about a couple of years. I would say last year was one of the first years that the numbers seem to be more clean in that way, right? In the idea that students we've seen the rates go back up, the kind of end of the COVID kind of effect, and we're kind of back in full time. That being said, there was kind of a glitch last year that did not affect Haldane so much, but during the ELA and mathematics, because of the move to computer-based testing, the state hosted site for computer-based testing actually crashed, as Dr. Duffy would know from her district previously. It crashed kind of during the first day of administration, which caused a lot of issues on other districts. Ours was not touched by that, thank goodness. We were able to move forward. I only share that in that some of my colleagues in other districts were calling for the state to nullify the results based upon the disruptions that took place, and some kids didn't come back to finish the assessments and all kinds of different things. But the point there is, just to go back, that the state has had some issues around this, and so I think that sometimes comparing to other districts, whereas provides an opportunity to be cautious about it. That being said, I do think that the assessments themselves provide a great amount of introspective work that can happen, right? Regardless sometimes of how other districts are doing, it is a barometer, and there is information to be gleaned from their participation that districts can utilize year after year after year, which is kind of what we've kind of focused on throughout that time. I've been sharing these updates that have been going along, but I figured I'd kind of start here a little bit too. So in June was the first administration of the geometry regents aligned to the New York State, the new New York State Next Generation Standards for Math. It was the first administration of the biology and earth and space regents exams aligned to the New York State NGSS, which Haldane, I'll get to, we did not participate in that one in June. And we'll see that a little bit more. And then computer-based testing dropped down into grades 4, 5, 6, and 8 in ELA math and science, right? And as we think about coming up at the end of this year, you're gonna have the first administration of the ELA regents exams aligned to new next generation standards. Chemistry and physics regents will be aligned to the new standards, and computer-based testing will be rolled out 3 through 8 in ELA math and science in its entirety. I share that because this has been kind of an ongoing process over the last 4 or 5 years. As the state has slowly kind of phased in these new exams that are aligned to new standards. It's a testament to our coordinators, our department chairs, our teachers in those departments, and our building administration as we've gone through these years to consistently take opportunities to make sure that we're aligned with these new standards and taking a really good introspective look at our curriculums and making sure that we're moving in the direction that the state is moving towards. Some have been easier than others, some have been more drastic than the others. But the point I think that we'll see is throughout our results and throughout our practices that our teachers have worked extremely hard to make sure that our students are well prepared for those. I want to make sure I get everything. Great. So something a little different this year is prior to seeing the data, just some thoughts around the performance over 2024 and 2025. Some things that we've gleaned as from taking a look at the results from a district. The first is some things that are confirming for us, right? And the first is, I would say, that is evidence of an effective, guaranteed, viable curriculum aligned to New York State standards. So as we look at these, not only in a particular year, but we've seen progress through over the last 4 or 5 years of our students. One of the things that we've come away walking from is the curriculums that our teachers are designing and implementing do a very significant job in communicating the essential standards to students and are making sure that it's equitable access for our students, right? It's evidence that is taking place within our district. You see this through consistency and performance in several grade levels and several content areas. A little bit differently, but just to throw in there, that 21 graduates were awarded the Seal of Biliteracy last year, and 52 graduates were awarded the Seal of Civic Readiness. That's something that you're going to see in the charts in terms of assessments, but when we think of the Haldane Essentials around communication and these other things, those are the areas that really kind of speak to that a little bit more, right? Areas for growth, or we say that areas for improvement, is maintaining consistency and performance around grade level. So, it's not that it's complacency, but maintaining those numbers year after year with different cohorts with the different standards that are kind of going through is work to be done and work to continue to be had. And so it's not something you sit down and just say, oh, we're doing this. It's always looking and saying, well, why are we doing this? And what are the ways that we have to keep doing this in a lot of ways? Particularly when you get into some of the numbers that you're seeing, we have 98% pass rates and 62% mastery rates in areas. It takes a tremendous amount of work for that to continue to keep happening. Right, so we're continuously looking at ways that we've been successful and the ways we've been successful and how we keep doing that in ways, as well as looking at areas for improvement. But this is something, we've had conversations in this spot and with this board in many ways, but there's a continued focus need to close achievement gaps among student subgroups, right? So when we look at areas that break down in terms of special education, economically disadvantaged, or ENL, or different subgroups, there are opportunities where we can consistently see where these are ways that we have to continue our efforts in closing those gaps. It's not, I don't want to say that the word that we need to start doing that, because we've been doing it all along. I think the concept is we need to continue to be maintaining our focus on making sure that we're doing things that close those gaps. So just a little bit of mindset as you kind of look through some of these numbers as we go through, right? Starting with ELA in grades 3 through 5. Again, just to orient, we're the blue. The red becomes comparable schools, which we've utilized in my time here, which tend to be similar in certain demographics to do that. And then the last column, mustardy, would be New York State, which is what's provided. And so you see in grades 3, 4, and 5, particularly, we maintain similarly at 79% or an 80% proficiency rate in ELA. Sticking with with grades 3 through 5, we take a look at mathematics. Same chart. Grade 3 tends to continuously be very high performing in that onset. We can move into 66 and 61% in grades 4 and 5 as well, right? Just to throw it out there, that one in grade 4 of the 81 comparable schools, one of those schools I cannot remember had a really outstanding year. It was something like 88%, which is a great testament to them. Throws the numbers off the average a little bit that way. Thought I just kind of right. And then when we switch to the middle school levels, grades 6 through 8 in ELA, we continuously see the trend of about 70%, 69, 78, and then in 8th grade an 83% proficiency rate. 6 through 8 in mathematics. Again, the only thing I continue to talk about in grade 8 is please understand that cohort is a split, right? We had 37 students take the Algebra 1 Regents during 8th grade, and 22 students take the New York State Math 8. And in this district, Haldane, we do not make students who take Algebra 1 also take the Math 8 assessment, right? It's separate in that way, right? I'm sorry to do this. Marianne, I left my black book right over there, I think. Is it sitting there or is it in my bag? I'm sorry, I had numbers in there just in case you asked me.
Are you afraid someone's gonna read it while you're up here?
What's that?
I said you're afraid someone's gonna go.
I just had additional things in case. For all you watching at home, thank you.
Very important data he left
I
out
thought
there.
it-
Doesn't want anyone to-
I mean, the other thing I know we've talked about in the past, but for people watching along, are in research, we call this like a cohort effect. Like these grades are so small
Yes.
relatively that lots of different things. It doesn't take much to sort of to throw the numbers one way or another, right? To make the
Our denominator is small.
Our denominator is small, so it's a couple of things in a couple of years.
Yeah. One movements one way or the other make drastic
Yeah.
changes in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? You know, both good and bad, right? But yes, these are conversations we have a lot when we're talking about numbers, is that denominator. And also, you know, just to be clear, it's not an excuse is the wrong term, right? It's who we are, and it's still something we need to pay attention to, and the numbers are what they are in that way. Good. And then our science results, right? So the 5th grade science was tremendous this year. It was also great last year, but it was tremendous. And then you see the 8th grade cohort. Now, the reason why there's nothing comparable, just to throw it out there, is other districts that we compare to either accelerate all in 8th grade, and so there's just not comparable numbers to really draw from to be able to say we're doing how we're doing against those numbers. But again, in our 8th grade, it splits, right? So we had 33 students take the living environment regents, and we had 16 students take the United Science 8 exam last year. And again, obviously, the students who are in living environment do not take the New York State 8 exam, right? So separate that. Okay? And so when we go back and take a look through subgroups, again, we lump these together 3 through 8 because of the numbers, right? To tease them out either individually or by 3 through 5 is so small, it gets difficult in that way. So we group them together. And so we can see in our ELA 3 through 8 in students with disabilities was 23% reaching meeting standards of proficiency, whereas our economically disadvantaged was at 60%. And then when we go 3 through 8 math, 34% is higher than in past years. But then, you know, 48% comparable that way. New York State doesn't provide a comparable in this graphic for us to easily represent in that way. Okay. So this is a little bit different. I figured I'd just throw it in here, but this is taking a look at, these are our current 9th graders. And looking back upon their history of taking these exams 3 through 8, not Regents exams aside, right? So they start in grade 4 and moves on. The reason it wasn't grade 3 is because their grade 3 was the COVID year, so that number is out. So grade 4 is actually the 2020-21. Grade 5 is 2021, 2022. You see how that goes. You know, this was just is a different way of looking at it. Instead of looking at things in particular year to year or singular years, is starting to take a look at some of the numbers through a cohort, how have a cohort looked as they've gone through the process of taking some of these exams, right? And what those scores have been. Okay. The numbers that are not up there.
Oh, before you go,
Yeah,
will you remind me, what year did the new math
I can't remember
report come in?
when the new map came out.
What year? Yeah. Oh, that was, sorry. I thought middle school adopted when year? Yeah.
It was the year before you started.
Oh, that long ago.
That'd be 2020.
All right, well, that's embarrassing. Okay, I felt like it was more recent than that. All right.
The new what? I'm sorry.
Happens to us all.
I knew when we adopted Eureka Squared, and it was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard the question. Eureka Squared was the 2022.
Been this cohort's 6th grade year, but big ideas would have been
Correct.
before. these
I know,
days. So
yeah.
Big Ideas is the middle school curriculum, Ruth Squared is the elementary.
Okay, so with the middle school adopted a new math resource sometime in the past number of years, but I don't remember when.
Big ideas, that
And
was.
but the because that was in 2020.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, thanks.
Yes.
And I don't remember the name. That was in 2020. Okay.
Yes. And Eureka Squared would have been in 2022, the
That sounds.
spring of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Josh, for
Yes,
that 50% number is because the Algebra 1 students are pulled out of that.
every year. Yep, in 8th grade. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yes. And the slide that isn't up here, thank you for the black book, is to be thinking about how the grade levels perform, each grade level consistently in each one of these years. So instead of a cohort effect, trying to think of it in, well, what has grade 3 done in these subsequent 4 years? And I would say that from a whole generalization is that we are performing higher in each grade level than we have 4 years ago. And some of them have been significant gaps, increases, and some of them have been marginally on par. But it's rare. My point is, when we go back to that first side about confirming a viable curriculum, is we're not having massive this, right? We're seeing a trajectory of this. There are times things dip down, but they're moving back up. But we're holding steady in the ways that we are, and actually moving at an increase in other directions versus moving in that direction, right? And when you look over 4 or 5 years, it presents some data that you can start looking at it from a curriculum standpoint in that way. There's been lots of changes that have happened since then that kind of go through that, right? So switching gears a little bit to Regents exams. So these are in grades 8 through 11 or 12, they're open through all, right? And we administered the following: Common Core English, Algebra 1, Geometry, Earth Science, Living Environment, Chemistry, Global History, and US History and Government. These are the middle school first. So of the 33 students taking Living Environment, all of them passed, and it was an 85% mastery rate, which is a score of 85 or higher. And then in Algebra 1, right, 37 students, 78% mastery, and students, with 85 or higher in that score. Right? And that's typical we've seen over the years that I've been doing these presentations, right? When we get into others, so some regions are scaled on a 3, 4, and 5, right? Just to go back. And the language around, but essentially a 3 equates to kind of your 65 and higher. It's bands, it's a high partially meets, right? That gets into that. And just, you can see that in Common Core ELA, if we go across the board, our passing rates are 91, 91, 81, 89, and 87. And particularly when you're thinking of ELA, you get a 62% mastery rate in that. And you can just kind of see the distribution of that that goes out there. And these continue to be very consistently strong results out of our high school Regents exams. These exams are leveled on a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so you can see again, our Living Environment, our Earth Science, and Chemistry. And so just a slight pause real quick when we talk about data. Last year was the first year that they offered the new Living Environment Regents exam aligned to the new standards. The state had given districts options at this point, which was different than other ones. So you could continue giving the what they call traditional Living Environment Regents, or the new one. Haldane, we opted to do the traditional one that had always been given previously. Hindsight, good move. The new exam that was given was not without controversies, to say the least. And anytime, sometimes there's a new exam, you run the risk of that happening. But there were a lot of concerns over the Lexile reading passages that were assigned to kids, the length of passages, all kinds of things. And so we did not utilize that. And as a matter of fact, for this year, we're continuing to stick with this one again, because they gave us the option again. So we will not do that at the end of this year. The idea is there. I think the process that came out of that was we're being thoughtful and intentional that our students are faring well, and until the state kind of figures something out a little bit, having a couple of years data worth of tests are work to our advantage. This isn't to say that our science department is just in this mode. They're kind of in a hybrid world right now, where they've done a lot of work over the last couple of years aligning to the new standards. and implementing a lot of those ways and making sure our students are prepared in that way. Right? Thoughtful in that.
Josh, real quick,
Yeah.
that living environment with all the eighth graders.
Yeah, it's a mix. Yep.
That's a mix. And then not all students take earth science,
No.
correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Right. So a new slide that I thought we put up is, we talk about student subgroups at our 3 through 8 NERC assessments, but I figured, to keep the story going, we talked about our subgroups in terms of special education and economically disadvantaged throughout our Regency exams as well. And so, very different slide, it's oriented a different way. All good? Great. Good. This is just to present, right? To show, now the numbers aren't listed there, but they're different. So geometry, you can see that 0 it's a very small number, right? Is what I can say around that. But just give you an opportunity just to see this for a second. Just talks a little bit around how our special education students fare on Regents exams last year, as well as our economically disadvantaged students.
These are the percent that pass?
Correct.
Pass. Proficiency.
It's 65 or higher.
65 or higher, yeah.
Right. It's also, the Regents does allow for the variance isn't the right term, but there's a safety net, excuse me, that's what it is, for students with disabilities, which is 55 as well, is passing, and that's a statewide scenario. Right?
But this number just reflects 65 and up.
Yes.
And it includes people who would fall in both groups.
Yes. 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 So yeah, just kind of going back to the original slide, I think the idea is when we think about these trends, confirming is evidence of a guaranteed curriculum that our teachers have worked really, really hard on, of creating and implementing, as referenced by the success that our students are having year over year. That is talking not only passing rates, but mastery rates, access to all of these, and obviously the seal of biliteracy and civic readiness, which is a different type of seal that goes on that. But also, as we can see, whereas we talk about doing well in some ways, there's obviously still gaps that we can continue to improve upon, right? To move forward, and as well as maintaining our consistency. We've continued a trajectory of moving forward, but we need to obviously be mindful and continue to do those things, right? And so, well, how, right? This is where we get at this a little bit. So I shared this with you a little bit last year, but it's something our administrative team has come up with, where a goal would be the continued development of a systematic approach to integrating data, complementing our processes for supporting or grounding conversations, evaluating programs, promoting inquiry, and informing decision-making at multiple levels, right? And so for the last 3 years or so, this is something that our team works on every single year. About how we go about doing this. And so I at great length last year, really teasing out all these things, truncated a little bit this year to get to the point here. But we've used a tremendous amount of data to inform things at the very systematic level in terms of professional development. We've talked around NWEA, the Reading League, or the Science of Reading, literacy consultants coming in, obviously UFly and Benchmark. This year we're having co-teaching professional development done at our buildings. And the Hudson Valley Arbor, which is for our E&L students, right? That has been ongoing work that has continued to be driven by what we see out of not only these results, but other results that we look at. Obviously impacts our MTSS process in terms of targeting tier 1, 2, 3 in services, the adoption of EduClimber, which is something that we're working on, continuing to build.
That's the software.
That is the software, yes. And we can get to that at a different time, but massive, doing good work. In terms of just soft things around curriculum resources and materials, but we've continued to utilize these resources when we're looking at literacy. So UFly and Benchmark are direct results of looking at some of this information, or multiple sources of information. The curricular reports that come out of the New York State assessments have directly impacted ways we think about middle school programming, particularly high school programming. And it's the ways that our teachers are looking at the gaps in performance to make curricular decisions around shifts in how they implement curriculum. The Khan Academy math program, K-5, our PAF reading program, which is targeted to our, a few years ago, to our really tier 3 students. And obviously the New York State assessment reports I talked about. Something that I'd say, at the more systems level, and then we get into the more, well, what about individuals, right? Which is where we kind of live right now, as we're about our midterm year. But, UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, was something we brought into the school as a common framework for how we talk around planning for students from the onset of how we think about our students as individuals and how we design instruction at the very beginning of instruction to be as inclusive as possible. That work is ongoing and started, I think, 2 years ago, right? Science of reading, when we think of our elementary practices, K-5 or even through K-8, we've had a tremendous amount of work done around our phonics programs and obviously moving towards implementing our new ELA resource, which will show. Lots of work with NWA data and our Haldane literacy profile in targeted small group instruction, right? It's one of the things that NWA provides a tremendous amount of way of how to group students within your classroom based upon lexile and targeted skills. And then obviously our local assessments and ensuring that our local assessments are aligned to state standards. Therefore, the data that you can collect out of student performance on local assessments is also meaningful. Not finalized in any of those by any means, but ongoing work that we do. And then obviously, what happens during mid-year or years when students in classrooms, are not as responsive to tier 1 or just kind of interventions by teachers. Just want to make sure that we understand we have what are called instructional support teams at each level, right? And it's a way for teachers to systematically present students that they think are struggling over a period of time. It's team-based, so there are, depending on each school, there are a multitude of individuals who come together to look at data that is presented and make decisions, not for students, but really about students. Which could result a huge gamut, depending on context. Could be things like, we should implement this strategy moving forward. They're going to get access to this AIS service. They're going to attend extra help. They're going to, seek counseling, whatever it is. It's really contextual at that point. But one of the things that is to say is, a student sometimes struggles with a particular standard or particular content area for a variety of reasons. It tends to be complex, right? Particularly when you're looking at our elementary students. Generally, if they're, deficiency in some area of phonics or whatever, that can manifest itself in needing resources for speech or PT or other aspects, right? And so we may not see the gains of that, particularly in a particular year of what we would deem success on a state assessment. And students with disabilities have multiple goals on our IEPs, not just proficiency. So, I think it's at that point that this district does a really nice job of thinking about the individual student. And that's where that kind of gets to in that point. I showed this, we've said this a couple of times, but just a piece of information with the Haldane learner profile, just to think differently. We collect a lot of information over the last couple of years around students' oral readings fluency, and we've partnered with the Reading League early on to help us just kind of think through this. And so the far left to you would be 2023 for students percent at the national benchmark of oral readings fluency, which I think is around the 75th percentile is how they norm that. It just kind of shows where students started at the grade levels in the fall, winter, spring. And then our teachers started to unofficially adopt and utilize UFly in kindergarten, first and second grade, to what we saw were really good results over last year, which led us in the fall to want to ask you to formally adopt UFly as our thing. So it's just an example of kind of a different level of information that we're using that doesn't come from a state assessment or even NWA at this point, that we are utilizing in ways to make some of those decisions. And then same slide as before, but particularly when we think about our student subgroups, I think the areas highlighted are areas that are not specifically for those subgroups, but 100% play into our thought processes as we are thinking around how we use data to target some of those groups. And I think we've built a really good foundation to allow some more work to continue to happen. But obviously NWA, Science of Reading, UFly, our co-teaching professional development we're having, and the Hudson Valley Arbor that done at the high school and middle school over the last couple of years has been extremely targeted within that subgroup. curricular resources like the PAF reading program, UFly, and then obviously the entire right-hand side of the slide there. We're just kind of ways of highlighting some of the data that we use and how we particularly target some of our student subgroups. Questions? Tried to truncate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sure.
There's so much information. It's really quite impressive.
Josh,
Yep.
so much has been written about the success of districts that have moved relatively early to science of reading programs across socioeconomic groups. So that way, economically disadvantaged students are actually doing quite well.
Mhm.
Have you seen? Do we have enough information of our own students that would follow that, where you see kind of that transition to science of reading?
Yeah, I think we never went away from a full science of reading, while we were still using aspects of units of study, right? And so I think we resurrected a good amount of that back. I would say in terms of what we've seen, I keep saying this, UFly. What we've seen out of that direct instruction of phonics with our K1-2 is really promising, right? In terms of what we think is going to be moving forward, right? So, if I go back to those slides, excuse me, where we've seen growth, I can't see it so well on the far side, but we're starting to see, students at a very, very early age progressing through mastering kind of that foundational phonics piece. And I'm not saying it wasn't something we didn't have, but this is extremely explicit teaching and through the ways of the science of reading that this is happening. And so really it's our first graders this year who've had, like last year it was piloted, but done with fidelity. And then this year, we've gotten the professional development and we're continuing to do it. We think that basis will be something that's going to carry us forward for years. Strong foundation. That's not to say it's not really happening in 4th, 5th, and 6th, 7th, and 8th, but I would just say in terms of it being really targeted from a programmatic standpoint, we're about 2 years into that part of that phonics part that's really, unified in that.
And one of the things that's really impressive in that spread is if you look at, so the first graders in 23, 24 are the second graders in 24, 25, right? And you see that group makes, well, it's not that the whole group makes progress, but there's an increase in the percentage of children who are above benchmark in oral reading fluency. But then, they maintain it and it stays, high in second grade. And actually, I don't know much about oral reading fluency and how it's tested after the second grade, but that's a real achievement, right? That the group overall gets stronger, and then they go into second grade, and at the beginning of second grade are still, everybody's mostly really retained those skills, and then that carries them through the year.
So the promise lies in that, right? They're learning to read and then reading to learn, right? And so the promise lies in the first K1, 2, 3, that they're really mastering these foundations that allow them to learn to read, and then it allows them better access to the curriculum as they move forward in terms of having that underlying skill to be able to master complex text moving forward. And what we do know is if you don't master those skills, it only just becomes more difficult as you move on, right, for students. And so I think aligning ourselves this way and then aligning our, tier 2, tier 3 at the element, all hands on deck in those early grades, we hope are something that we're definitely wanting to see moving forward as it continues to move forward in that way.
Do we have a sense of, is it still a trend for parents to opt out of having their kids take assessments, the state
No, I would say not in Haldane. The numbers are, so much so I know I used to present that, but the opt-out rates are extremely small. I would say, actually, my black book, right here. Well,
putting it to good use now. That's a good question.
In grade 3, we had 3 students opt out. Grades 4, 5, 100%. Grade 6 was 4 students, and grade 7 and 8 for the 3 through 8 were all.
Were the numbers higher when the scores were getting tied to the teacher's APPR, like back when?
I wasn't here, but historically,
That was definitely when it
100%.
was like,
That
when
was
there were all the protests and activism
some districts were
around
more than
it.
others, but those opt-out rates were in the 25s to 30%.
Yeah,
rates.
it changed a lot when they decided to remove that piece from the, that
Yeah.
test scores would be tied to us.
That's a really good point, but has how the tests are administered changed as well? Like, so I remember when I ran for I'm just wondering if
So there was a
there's
time
chance
period.
that they're not being perceived by families as being as stressful and as impactful, and so parents are more comfortable having their students take it.
Maybe. I do know, back in the day, there were 3 days, over 3 days.
Right, after.
And so, right, there was a lot of, the state receiving a lot of information around that these tests were particularly stressful for students, right? Because there used to be a timed portion of it, and if you wanted to stay later, you had to be moved somewhere, or whatever that was. Bias aside, the state's answer to that was we chopped it down to 2 days, and we're just gonna make it untimed. Which I'm not sure alleviates kids' stress because you see kids working all day on it, right? Like, right? Like they skip lunch and we all see these things. So maybe, I don't know if people perceive it to be more or less stressful at times. I think decoupling it is a big thing that's probably happened. That's a result. The other thing I would just say when we think around the maintaining the consistency, I just saw it in my notes though, particularly at the high school level is, we're still waiting on the changes or proposed changes from New York State Ed or from the Blue Ribbon Commission, which is supposed to be pretty extensive in terms of graduation pathways and options for students. They've announced that we have to have, the financial literacy, and great, but there's a lot of other things that they promised or thought out of that that has not come out yet in any sort of detail for us. That talks around different pathways for students to be able to graduate. That would either be not taking certain assessments or taking certain assessments or having more locally developed assessments in some ways. So there's an unknown out there around what that looks like specifically. They've labeled it for us, but we don't really know the specifics of how to implement it, which is a little concerning because I think the cohort is in 9th grade right now. Sophomores, excuse me, I'm behind you. Right. So, we're gonna get these requirements coming.
Little different, but you have an opportunity, maybe, I don't know the tea leaves and how it'll work out, but you have for next year, you'll have a pre-K cohort go to kindergarten.
Yep.
So you'll be able to analyze at least that number, at least with our students.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that something how much are we looking at that curriculum and that impact for oral fluency?
Yeah, obviously some. The idea is it's great that those students will come in. We're going to see a lot of social benefits from students who are in school pre-K and coming into kindergarten. I'm not sure how much we'll see from like an oral reading fluency, like if they've mastered phonics at pre-K, but they'll play school a lot better, right? So when they come into kindergarten, right, it's more or less time on the transitional piece at some point, and more time can be spent on the instructional. I say that with never teaching pre-K or kindergarten in my entire life. Yeah, and I say there's more time spent on this, but in theory, the concept is right that we've had them in school for a year, and as they transition to us, that transition will be more familiar for some of our kindergarten students, which has the opportunity to present more time on some phonics. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those phonics score looks like in our kindergarten cohort as we test for next year too.
Yeah, that fall run, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Luke, I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm actually offering information. Did you have a chance to talk to either Dr. Duffy or Mrs. Sniffen about that we were going to have this presentation tonight before the meeting? It's fine if no, because I actually wanted to just make sure you had a little bit of context for it. So the state requires that the board be presented every year the results of our state standardized tests. And those are the first tests that Mr. Elder was talking about, which are the grades 3 through 8 ELA tests and the grades 3 through 8 math tests, and then the grades 5 and 8 science tests. But this board, and those tests are important, and there's a lot you can say about state standardized tests, but the board has decided that, and the district, that those are important, but they're not the whole story. And so then the whole additional part of that presentation that Mr. Elder just did is really sort of addressing questions that he's gotten from the board over the years, which is, tell us more about what kind of data are teachers using when they're making plans for either, teaching a class, or as Mr. Elder was talking about at the end, when groups of teachers come together to try and problem solve for students that are having a more challenges with mastering different material. And so, as you can see, there's a wealth of different kinds of data. And this presentation actually is sort of the endpoint of a number of years of us sort of dancing back and forth to figure out, like, what does the board really want? And like, what do we have to say? And so a lot of where we've really tried to get to is also to see that presentation, but then to also hear from Mr. Elder, and through him from his colleagues as well, like what are the leaders in the district, that instructional leaders in the district, the principals and the different directors, what are they seeing in these data and how are they making sense of it? So, yeah.
Do you know why New York State doesn't have that piece of information to compare for kids with disabilities and economically disadvantaged? I feel like that would be kind of an
I
interesting.
don't know. I can probably dig a bit deeper on that and probably see what we can't find around that. But it would require, so what's easy on the website is they've done the work on the ELA and math for the state, and they just kind of put the number up for you. They don't break it down in any other way, so in a subgroup, so we'd have to go through and just count every special ed student and do it that way. Yeah. I don't know why.
I just feel like that would be an interesting piece of information to compare how our population's doing.
Yeah, I would agree.
And you definitely, there was forethought. Every number I wrote down that was like, ask Josh about this, but like you addressed it, like that there was a discrepancy or it stood out in some way. You answered it throughout the presentation. So, yeah.
Has there been a request for new PD from teachers saying like we need something more for X curriculum, anything that's been coming out as has been presented?
I think all the time, which is
specifically off of this, like where they say like and you've seen like at least kind of in the short term something
100%. I mean, I'll do the best I can here. And keep it short. I think that it's I joke around, it's one of the great problems to have is when teachers are asking for different levels of professional development. So, I mean, UFly is a great example, as they kind of were piloting on their own, and they did it for a year, but they're like, we've never had anyone actually walk us through it, train us. So we partnered with Southern Westchester BOCES, who had a contract with UFly. We were going to go to Florida, didn't work out. Florida came up here. And so we're phasing it in for all our K1, 2, 3 teachers this year, that they'll all get the development from UFly, from the University of Florida Literacy Institute, directly. So that's great, right? That only confirms that the science teachers of the last 2 years have been working with a science consultant to ready their curriculums for the new kind of the standards, the new assessments that are happening in that way. I'd say Ms. Sniffen and Dr. Silke with the Arborn have had over the last 2 years professional development specifically around how to teach students with our new English as a new language, as we've seen that in population increase. And that's been a direct result, not only of what they've noticed, but from teachers asking, look, I'm seeing more and more students, so we need this. The list goes on and on. We're on mathematics. Yes, yeah, lots of ways.
Thank you. So actually, now I think I'm just gonna, because there's slides, I have to say, I like sitting here so much more than sitting and like feeling like I'm between the person
I
and
can
the presentation.
see that, but you have to come back here after.
So just so that folks know, we're transitioning to the next agenda item, which is beginning to have our conversations about planning for the 26-27 budget. I will hear from business manager Catherine Platt, and Dr. Duffy.
I'm excited, everybody. We're kicking off the budget season tonight. So I look at this as an opportunity to start a collaborative but public process on what the budget is. So I know at least being here now for a couple of months, we've had some committee members and staff and things at times asking how a budget is developed and what goes into it. And so to me, this is the first opportunity to talk about how we develop our budget. And so just a couple of things to keep in mind. We always want to make sure that our budget is supporting the high achievements. We just saw the great achievements of our students for us. We want our budget to continue to support and give our students those really amazing learning experiences. But we also, it's that balance of then also being mindful to put forth a budget that is respectful and mindful of our taxpayers. And so I think those are our two goals as we think through what a budget should look like. And then also just making sure we're continuing to share information in a very collaborative public. So those are just some of the goals as I think about developing a budget. So tonight, we'll have a chance to hear from Catherine to start. She'll give us some really great background information in terms of our recent tax history and how that's going to guide us moving forward in this coming school year. Looking at foundation aid, so what's our status of state funding? Where are we landing right now? We don't have everything figured out, but things are starting to come into play. And then looking at our preliminary information. So that's what we know about healthcare and teacher retirement, that type of thing. And the next steps is going to talk about our calendar that we'll use for the next 5 or so months as we are developing our budget. She gets to do the next couple of slides.
Okay, we always just start the new school year by remembering the last school year. And just a reminder that last year, our voters approved a 2.8% increase to the tax levy in May. When we ran it through all the assessments and calculated the tax bills, it resulted in a net 2.19% increase to the tax rate in Phillipstown. Over the past few years, we've had a levy as high as 3.67% and as low as 1.88%. In the last 2 years, we did hold it flat at 2.80%. Foundation aid, I didn't update this because I got the information. It was late breaking news with the executive budget getting released late this afternoon. Prior to today, we were showing that we were going to get no increase to foundation aid. We are not getting a gigantic one, but they have guaranteed a minimum of 1% to school districts with the governor's budget. Doesn't mean it's gone through. So it would be about a $29,000 increase to foundation aid. So these slides will continually get updated as I get more information. The things that we do know, health premium increase has been set at 5% by the consortium that we take health insurance through. Our teacher retirement system projection is a slight decrease. It's going from 9.59% this year down to somewhere between, the estimate is 8.25 to 8.75%. But while that one has a slight decrease, the ERS employee retirement system has an increase from 16.5% to 17.6% this year. We are still pending our budget, our BOCES budget needs. I did start getting some pricing. I'm going to be working with administration to go through what we need from both the RIC and from BOCES. And I did not get an estimate from our insurance company yet about what our insurance policies will increase by. The warning has been that it will be on the higher side. Things we're still working on. We're going to split this screen, but things that are not settled yet, but that we are actively working on that will have a factor on our budget. We are still in negotiations with our administrators union. I'm working with our people personnel department to talk about any expanded programming that we might need in our special education department. Our tax levy calculation, we're underway with that. The one thing that we need to keep in mind this year is this will be the first year that we will see the increase from the capital proposition that was passed by the voters in November of 24. Don't have numbers yet, but we will just have to keep that in mind. Governor's executive proposal, did come in, didn't have a time to go through it into crazy detail. We do have it does look like we have a small increase to foundation aid. Expense-based aids look like they might have a small decrease right now. And there is some discussion of an increase for state aid for our universal pre-K program. As always, we talked about it last year. We're still continuing to watch what might happen with federal funding. What I am trying to do is build a budget that will allow us to preserve as much programming as possible if by chance there is any kind of cuts to our federal funding. And as always, we are looking for any cost savings or cost efficiencies that we can make throughout the district where it would make sense to keep the quality of the school district while, again, being respectful to the tax levy that we're going to increase.
And then we're full steam ahead with our STEAM, because I'm having a lot of fun tonight, with our STEAM planning. So thinking through what we need to do in terms of curriculum, hiring teachers, what type of resources, materials we need. Safety and security review, we just received our safety audit from Altera, so I'll share that with the board over the next couple of days, meeting with our team of administrators to go through what's being recommended, and then we'll look through what's already in the capital project versus what are some things that we can do within the budget. Staffing is always something this time of year. We know that we have a handful of retirements, so we're working through what positions need to be filled moving forward, what makes the most sense as far as that goes. And enrollment is always top of mind in terms of looking at the number of students we have per grade. All right, got some notes on it. All right. So this slide is talking about long-term planning, which is something that maybe isn't brand new to Haldane, but I want to take a moment just to remind the board and the community about the really thoughtful conversations you've had for many years about your campus master plan. So just as a quick reminder, get my notes correct here. The campus master plan was adopted by the board in October of 23. And while I wasn't here at that time, I'm really happy to say that I've gone through the document. I should have brought it. It's quite lengthy, as you know, but I've gone through it quite a bit, and I'm impressed with just the number of stakeholders that were involved in the discussions, all of the different types of conversations and topics that you spoke about in terms of how can we enhance student experience and how can we also improve our buildings and grounds as we go. And so lots of different things kind of came out within that capital master plan. Part of it, and I think that's guiding some of our budget discussions this year, there were 10 separate goals that were identified, but I just want to highlight a couple that you'll start to see as a theme as we go through our budget presentations. So improving safety across the district was something when these discussions were first beginning, was definitely something top of mind. Accessibility across the district as well, and then continuing to enhance student experiences in the arts and athletics. Additionally, there were 3 projects that were discussed within the campus master plan. Project 1 is the project that the community voted on a year ago in the fall. We're hoping to be able to break ground in April. We're waiting just for a little bit left from the state to approve this work. And just as a quick reminder, Project 1 includes a lot of great work at the high school. So creating a new student center at the high school, STEAM innovation labs at both the high school and the main building, additional classrooms at the high school, student support suites at both buildings, and also enhancing security across the district. So that's already been voted on, board approved, and we're hitting the ground running with that. But during those discussions, there were 2 other projects that were started to be discussed. Not at all finalized, not budgeted for, not voted on yet, but just in case, I know we've had some community members lately asking about other enhancements to our facilities. So I just wanted to bring this forward to everyone as we're talking about long-term planning. So project 2 under consideration at that time was talking through, could we look at building a high school auditorium, maybe additional music classrooms, a fitness and wellness center at the main building. That was project 2 for the future. And then project 3 for the future for consideration was a high school gymnasium, new locker rooms, and an expanded art gallery. So I just bring this up to share, yes, we're in project 1 and that's been budgeted for, and we're looking to break ground in April. These are 2 other areas of multiple things that our community who were involved in the campus master plan thought were worth looking at. How can we continue to enhance student experiences? So that's where long-term planning will come into play. We want to try to look at how can we bridge the gap from the capital project that we know is taking place and has been funded for and planned for with other critical needs that are coming up. And so what we want to do is review our capital reserve funds to ensure that we are preparing for these long-term expenses. So just this year, in my short time here within athletics, we've had community members ask about, can we fund for lights on the field? Can we improve tennis courts? Thinking through arts, there's definitely some areas that some of our parent community in that arena is hoping that we continue to plan for. And then also safety and security. So we know we have the capital project, we're planning for that. We also want to continue to look at though this reserve fund and how can we start to identify what are those other critical needs that we want to budget for and plan for. And that'll help support some of the efforts in the community when we know we have some community members that perhaps want to help support the district by fundraising. So I just first want to be clear on what can the district fund for, what can we budget for, and then that might help some of these discussions moving forward. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything there. And then eventually we'll come back together once we are well underway with our project 1. What should project 2 look like and what should project 3 look like? And then we'll have to follow the same process in terms of identifying what goes in the project, what's the budget, and then going back up for voter approval. So I just wanted to bring that forward as we were talking about long-term planning. I see it nicely connected, but I just wanted to make sure the board, just to kind of remind us and any of the community members that are watching as well. And I think Catherine, you want to talk a little bit about capital planning for transportation.
Just along the same lines of long-term planning and starting to prepare for the electric vehicle mandate that is still being discussed as having to take place. We have been meeting with vendors and talking to different people about, whether we could do this as an actual capital outlay or if we could do something along a capital lease. So again, it just goes with our long-term planning that as we go through this budget development season, we may be spending some time talking about how we will start to prepare the district for the expenses that will come with the electric bus mandate. And then just to remind everyone, we'll be talking about the budget at every meeting going forward. So just a quick timeline, we'll update this each time, but next time when we join you on February 3rd, we will be talking about our budget goals, our priorities, and we should have a very good handle on what our tax cap, allowable tax cap would be at that point. And then on February 24th, kind of really come back with some in-depth discussion of where the budget looks, what we think our additions or subtractions would be to present a balanced budget, and then continuing on. Any questions?
No, I wanted to thank you all and Dr. Duffy for, just really putting the long-term planning in the context of the planning that's already taken place. I mean, I think the last meeting with so many people coming, really expressing a deep desire to enhance our tennis courts, and then another conversation that I think many in the community are aware of, but hasn't really surfaced yet here at the board meeting, is this question about, enhancing other athletic facilities, particularly around the issues of lights. And, what we saw with the really strong vote for the capital project bond referendum is so many people supporting the school district. And then, I think what we've then continued to see, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in new business, but this increased it feels to me like a little bit of an increased awareness about the district and the board and what's going on and questions and why and how and wanting to support, right? And so just really acknowledging that there is, a lot of support for the district out in the public, but also a lot of well-intentioned hopes and dreams for what the district can accomplish. So I really wanted to say that I appreciated, Dr. Duffy and Catherine thinking about sort of how to plan, how to put some of this in the context of this history, sort of, being very clear about what we're doing right now and what potentially is possible and quite likely, will be planned for, in the future. Great. With collaboration. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can we leave that, so I may want to come back to that slide when we have our discussion a little bit later. So you can turn the screen off, but I do want to remind it, have those dates available. And I didn't bring my.
I know.
That's great, yeah.
Profits.
Lots of great discussions.
Yeah, no, you brought up really great points about, how many people were involved and all the different things that came up. And good. Okay. So next on the agenda is communication from the public. So this is the opportunity for the board to hear and to receive input from the entire school community. The first public comment session is reserved for comments on special presentations and active agenda items. Anybody who would wish to address the board, we'd ask you to sign in and state your name for the record. Keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less and avoid disparaging remarks and discussion of school district personnel. And although the board does not engage in dialogue during the comment session, we would be listening and we'd reach out for future connection. Right. Then next are our fantastic administrator information reports that we get for our workshop meeting. Michelle, you had some really great questions from Ms. Sniffen that I saw in an email. I thought it would be worthwhile to, if you wanted to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what were your questions and what you learned?
Some were questions, some were comments. Yeah, I emailed Ms. Sniffen just commenting on the increase in BOCES enrollment, and it was something that Luke mentioned too. It's just really great. And I asked her what factors she attributed that to. So I don't know. Didn't get a chance to see if you responded to my email.
So she did. Oh, sorry, she did. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
gonna have you just come up.
It was a busy day. It was a busy day.
Sorry.
But I was like, that's excellent news. And it seems like it's really been targeted this year. Like there was a lot.
So I thought it was a really great exchange.
Great.
So I think a few things with BOCES. One, I think like we're in line with the national trend, right? I think there's an increase in trade. I think people recognize the importance and see the value and see the long-term career path that's an option within the trade. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase. I do think that hiring somebody specific for the 9th and 10th grade as a guidance counselor, who I think I attached kind of her timeline. That's new in terms of the amount of options and the push-in and the Naviance and the parents' nights and the student night and meeting one-on-one with the students to complete their application process. So I just think there's more time dedicated to the freshmen and sophomores. So I do attribute a piece of that to having Maggie.
Yeah.
As well.
I heard someone speak recently that one possible factor, although I don't necessarily imagine it's something that 9th and 10th graders are thinking about, is that, with some of the uncertainty that AI is raising for a lot of the white collar jobs, right? There are so many of the trades and the kinds of things that BOCES are really designed to support that are never going to be turned over to technology. So, healthcare and the trades, electricians, plumbers, other stuff.
All of those. And I think a lot of students, like, there's also this innate interest in learning how to do it, whether you're gonna pursue it or not. I think students now, like that problem solving piece of like, wait, someone's coming into my house and can fix the electricity.
Right.
Why don't I know how to do that?
Right.
Like, I think
Or to
that
fix a
there's
car.
that question of like, okay, but I do think it might not be the 9th and 10th graders but their parents are saying, have skill, like have a trade, learn it. And we're seeing kids apply to 2-year trade schools and 4-year trade schools as well for college post high school. But I mean, I think about some of the kids that went to trade, then went on to 4-year after and now have that skill set.
Right.
Like that's amazing.
Right.
And I also just called out the 2 new classes, the electives, what's it, athletics and society.
Athletics and society,
art history.
and then art history with a spin of local history.
Yeah, and as the
art history class.
director of the hub, I was like really excited to see that Mr. Manny and the health and the PE teachers all went to do the co-occurring systems of care.
I actually went too, and I had seen Stephanie speak. Actually, she spoke here back in like 2018 when she
Right,
was
right,
first
right,
hitting
when she
the
first
road.
started.
And Dr. Sylvia and I had a chance today to actually talk a little bit about it, and I know she was gonna talk to Mr. Crow. But it really was it's 3-day curriculum, that we're looking to implement in all classes in the high school right now. There'll be a parent night, there'll be a teacher, professional development opportunity on co-occurring disorders, which I think most of us would agree that if you're in this profession or you're in the mental health profession, most of the struggles we see are co-occurring.
Yeah,
Right,
right. There's an addiction issue.
Depression and addiction, health. There's anxiety and, usage. So
And it's aligned with what's going on in the county, with the state and broader too, like that this curriculum is kind of taking off. So it's awesome that
Good
you
job.
made that a priority.
yeah, I think it's the first time like the federal government has both put funding towards substance abuse and mental health at the same time.
I mean, just one more thing I'll say, this also just sort of aligns with the district's commitment and increased investment over the past number of years, right? You mentioned the 910 guidance counselor, but I mean, just really, the continued support that the district has worked to provide for students and families. So great.
And if you look at the data, again, like to Josh's point, like if you look at the data, we're actually seeing less crises than we saw right after COVID in high school. Probably multiple variables, but I would like to definitely say it has to do with.
There's been a lot of investment. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody. So next on the agenda is just talking about the committee minutes that we received. The policy committee, man, y'all have been busy this year.
Yes, we have.
All right. And we have policies you all have been worked on later on in the agenda. So next, we're going to move into consent agenda, starting with consent agenda minutes. May we have a motion, please?
So.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next is consent agenda personnel. May we have a motion, please?
Moved.
Second.
Oh, see a couple of student teachers on here. That's always nice to see. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And then consent agenda financial. Maybe some motion, please.
Second.
And just so people know what we have here, what the board is doing is approving the acceptance of 2 grants from the Haldane Arts Alliance for the high school arts club for a mural and a trip to the Met. So big thanks to the Haldane Arts Alliance and their continued support. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so unfinished business. The first is our Board of Ed retreat date. We have a date, but we need to decide on a time.
Right, so the date is February 12th.
12th.
That's a Thursday. It was great to find a date we all were free.
Yes.
Good.
And I think the question really is, we usually go for 2 to 3 hours because we have some activities and we have a meal.
Earlier start.
So what time can people start? That's the question.
Ezra, what's the earliest that you could be
The
here?
earliest?
Well, no, what's it wouldn't be a convenient start. That's what I meant to say.
But what do we have 5 on there ish?
5-ish, I think I basically just, so that's.
Probably make 4. I'll make 4.
What is, so is that possible for everybody? 4?
I can do 4.
4 is nice because that means we're not going super late.
Yeah.
Evan?
Yeah, that works for me.
That works, yeah.
27?
Okay.
Okay. So Megan will update that invitation.
Yep.
To be 4 to 7.
Have we ever made a decision that fast?
The hard work was
Wasn't
getting.
it good? 4.
Next, we have new business, the CSE, CPSE recommendations. May we have the recommended action, please?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education as presented.
May we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so next is a policy review. This is actually, so first let's have the recommended action, please, and then motion.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts policy 1620 as written.
May we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so this is actually a first reading, but it's just some minor changes, which we want to have the first reading and possibly go ahead and adopting it. It's always weird because I'm going to explain this, but also get the order right. And I mean, we already kind of spoke about that pretty quickly.
So I have it up. You want me just to mention?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, it's about the reorg meeting, and we have now until it has to take place in July, on or before the Monday after the 20th of July each year. So we have a little extension of when we want to schedule. So we probably will still do the reorg meeting early in July. It is nice to kind of kick off the summer, but this gives us just a little more flexibility if there ever is a year that we need to go a little later.
Great. And there have been years where we've needed that for some reason or another. So, right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And next is the policy review. So this is the first reading of a policy, and it really is a first reading because it's a pretty big change. And I believe you were going to have.
Yes, Ms. McKay is here, so she'll come on up to the podium and just give us, I provided an overview in the weekly update to the board on Friday, but we figured since Erin was able to come tonight, she'd be glad to. So you just quickly go over why we're starting to put these revisions in place.
Sure. So good evening, everybody. Each year, the board looks and has to make sure that they have a policy in place for independent educational evaluations. A part of that process is just to make sure that we have an approved list of evaluators within the region that parents and families can go to for those evaluations. So how I collected some of those for this list specifically for this year is we partner with some of the other local districts to make sure that we're utilizing evaluators within the region that are effective. They're good at what they're doing. They're well experienced, and many of our districts have used them. So I worked with some of our local districts to make sure we have that list updated, make sure all the people that are on it are still practicing, all of those kinds of pieces, so that families have a good list to go to when they need them.
Yeah. But there's some changes in the policy, and my reading of those changes was really to lay out more clearly the rights of families.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. So we're not making any substantial changes. It's really just to kind of outline it a little bit more in a robust way so that families are very clear of each of the steps and what the process is and what their rights are.
Okay, anybody have any questions? No. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody, do we need to have more discussion on it? No. So we can be ready to adopt the policy at the next meeting.
Mhm.
Thanks again to the
I
policy.
think it's great
committee.
to have it written out so clearly. Yeah.
And so we won't have adopted the policy, but we still need to have the list. So we want to go ahead and approve this list.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now a recommended action for the approval of the independent educational evaluator list.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the list of independent educational evaluators as attached.
Can we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And I guess I didn't stop for discussion because we had just had such a good description of the process through which the list was put together. So thank you very much. So the next is a discussion. So it says board open houses with community. So I asked for this to be put on the agenda because I think the last board meeting that we had, some events that happened last year, outreach that we've gotten. I mean, the board's seen an uptick in emails this year, I think, than we've had. I'm about to have a second conversation with a person who just wants to find out more about how the board, like what does the board do? It feels to, and also at the meeting that Ezra and I were at last year with the PTA, someone said, well, like we as a community should engage more with the board. So right now, the way it's set up is that if people have something they wanted so the purpose of board meetings are for the board to do board business, but we open up for comment in which we don't engage. And if people want to come in and talk about something that's not on the agenda, the opportunity for them to do it is at the second communication from the public. And in a meeting like we had last time, it was fine for people to hear those things, but I don't know if it feels like the most welcoming way to get input from the community, to ask people to come to a meeting and then sit through a meeting for the second communication, from the public. Am I being clear?
Yeah.
Am I explaining myself? So this is a perennial issue I think that boards deal with, like how do we, what's the best way for us to interact with the public? And I don't think anybody's landed on a solution that's perfect for them. But after the last meeting, I felt like, did we want to consider some possible options for if people have things that they want to really talk to a couple of board members about? Do we want to consider some other ways of inviting people to communicate with the board? And so I thought of one thing. I don't think my idea is necessarily the right one, but I'm tossing it out there. And I'm really open for us to have a discussion about this, not something that we have to decide on now, but that we could decide on in the coming month or so, right? And my idea was still kind of link an event, and other boards do this, right? I've gone to things that not BOCES, but at like the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, right? I've been to a number of sort of round tables with leaders, and these are some of the things that I've heard people do, which is to set up times when there's a superintendent and one or two other board members, but just two, right? So that we don't have a quorum, and to invite people to come to have a conversation with us. And in those circumstances, people can ask questions, they can bring concerns, but it is one way to create possibly a little more comfortable environment than coming to a meeting, sitting for an hour, and then getting up and having 3 minutes to say what you want to say. So anyway, that was my thought. Did we want to consider something like, especially as we go into budget season, identifying a few meetings where we sort of announce in advance that Dr. Duffy, myself, and probably one other board member, we're going to be here at 6:30, and if people had questions, they could come. I'm not sure it's the best way for us to move forward, but it was an idea that I had.
I mean, there certainly is, it seems like a no-brainer insofar as if there are conversations that folks would rather have and have a little reciprocity, then I would want to do as well. I know that, we have I've developed a protocol for communicating about certain kinds of issues that come up in the district. And one of the things that I think about when we talk about an open conversation that's just like, you can talk about whatever you want, is I often find myself in a position of saying, well, that's a really good question. Let me direct you to the person who can actually answer that.
Yeah.
I would want that to be sort of understood by individuals who come up.
That's a good
that
point.
there are only a certain number of things about which we should be talking about openly, off the top of our nut, just as as members of the Board of Education, because we could we will inevitably misspeak,
right?
Those are the kinds. So I'm more attracted to open meetings that have a topic of conversation as opposed to just an open sort of comment box, unless it's still the same understanding. It's like, yeah, put your comment in the box. I hear you. Yeah, I'll get back to you about who you should actually be talking to about.
That's really, and actually, when I was talking about this with Dr. Duffy, Dr. Duffy's thought was like, well, why don't we? So I laid out my thinking about putting on this on the agenda, but Dr. Duffy was like, I think also like, that's pretty open. And Maggie was like, that's pretty open. But like, what about linking it directly to the budget, right? And so, that's something that we could do, which is why I actually wanted to have those dates up at some point, like sort of figuring it, maybe we could plan to try it twice, right? Like, and, maybe one is
like maybe one would be March 17th after the recommended budget, right? Tied directly to the budget. And then another could be theoretically either on the 21st, April 21st, the night we're going to adopt the budget, right? Because that's, and then people could ask questions or wait until after we've adopted the budget and it's possibly been in the paper, and we would do it at the May 5th, and then you'd have both a public hearing and the 3-part component budget. So, we don't have to decide that now, but it is a good thing that there's increased interest in wanting to communicate with the board, and for very, very good reasons that I'm not going to go into here. We're going to keep, I believe we're in consensus that we are going to keep the structure that we have for the 2 opportunities for communication and not opening it up to non-meeting related items until the second meeting. Anybody has a question about why we do that, I'm happy to tell you. But to at least experiment with being to opening up some alternative ways of interacting with the board, or in this case, one. So,
Peggy, do you remember? I think this is before my time on the board, but members of the board would walk around on the blacktop with the flyers. Do you remember that year? With the budget, it was like trying to kind of get with the dates, which is great.
Right.
But it was sort of that whole idea. And I can totally appreciate that because, in terms of trying to have like a coffee with, coffee with the board, something like that. But I would be terrified to watch it. I'm not terrified, but there's definitely that balance. But I think this is great, trying to be a little bit more open and just be more available to people. Like Sean said, just that, it's that direct line and to
that's right. I think that's right. It's to make it to clear. And then, like, depending on how it goes, like, I mean, there are boards in the community that, like, I don't know how often they do it, but every so often, like, people show up at a local coffee shop, and then people at that point are invited to talk about pretty much, anything. And I bet there is a lot of, well, let me refer you to that person. It's not like, I understand you have this concern, but it's not it would be inappropriate for me to help you because that's not my expertise or that's not my role. But yeah, so I thought it would be a good thing to try and also try. That's it.
And one of the benefits to having something like you just described at a coffee shop is that, it does give us an opportunity in public to be performing what it is our actual responsibility is. So if someone comes to a meeting, someone comes to a meeting, we are in one way or another restricted by the formality of this meeting to not constantly be providing context for what it is we actually do.
Right.
If we're at a coffee shop, we can say, that's a great question. This is what a board member should be saying and doing and how we should behave. Really at the end of the day. And I'm demonstrating to you here in a conversational way what my responsibility is to the district, what my responsibility is to the community. And by saying to you, this is the person you could speak to, and this is why it would be inappropriate for me to say, you're right, we should do X, Y, and Z. There is something to be said for doing that kind of work in a way, so long as whoever's participating at that, isn't reactive like I am. Is emotionally stable. And,
I like the idea of pursuing, alternate venues for conversation. I will say on the flip side, and this is a positive thing, I chatted with a bunch of parents who were out last week, since we were talking about last week's meeting, and they had a long transportation study to sit through, and it was kind of like this, oh my gosh, that was a really long meeting. I had to wait till the very end. And they kind of gave the opposite, like, they were like, I'm so glad I got to see.
That's so great.
They were like, because it's kind of gets them in the door, right? Having an interest, and they saw the workings of the board, and then they got to actually watch what was an engaging presentation about something that's of great interest to the district. So not that all our board meetings have a topic like that, but nobody was feeling like, oh man, I wish I feel like sometimes it's the kids who are kind of like, this is a long time I should be doing homework right now. it can be
true?
long for,
Long for them to be sitting.
Come up to the podium and tell us about how much you'd like.
but I do think especially during budget season, it makes sense. You know, to me, the awkward thing is the lack of reciprocity. I do find it kind of weird, like you're gonna talk, we're not responding until email after the fact. That does feel a little awkward to me. I understand completely why we do it. But I feel like if we're all together and we have like people in the room who actually can answer, why don't we take that moment to actually engage with them, you know? Yeah.
Well, I would love to see people come to, I mean, it hasn't been like loads of people, but I mean, I think some of us are getting questions about, well, so what does happen in board meetings and
Right.
why? And I think those are good questions for some people to have. So. All right. So what are we saying?
March 17th. I mean, that could be that I also do the precursor to the Irish jig for Ezra and others.
The rest of us says, I think really what we're missing is an entertainment component.
I haven't even spoken to the admin yet about Irish dancing for the children, but it's on my list. We'll talk about it. So March 17th and May 5th, I think were the two that I wrote down.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
And not huge, right? And if it turns out that there's like scores of people, then we often think about, do we need to schedule another open meeting around the budget? And we often have them. And you know what, if no one comes, that's also fine.
Because they might have questions being like that they're just going to want to see the budget, and then it'll turn into, well, why don't you come to the meeting?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's,
Right.
it's really
Good timing.
the third,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I think choosing different. 17.
I wrote the 17th.
Yes, because it's after the recommended budget. I think the 17th and the 21st, right? I mean, if the people have questions,
Yeah.
then it is an opportunity for them to stay and
stay.
Will we be serving alcohol for March 17th?
No, we will not.
Will this be an adult beverage?
The only issue I have is meetings after you've already adopted the budget to discuss the budget.
Well, so it's not, so
Yeah,
the first one is.
So maybe not the 5th then.
Is the 5th too late?
So you think then so you think the 24th? Like, what are you thinking? Earlier?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, you just throw it out there and you're like, hey, we already adopted the budget, but I'm happy to hear from you.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's needlessly cold on a schedule. You're saying, well, I'm informing you about the budget, but people, when they want to present something, are presenting for the purpose not just to gain information, but to express a hope of action sometimes.
Yeah.
And so once you have it, and
it's
after
organized
that, after you've already adopted the budget, like, well, you already adopted the budget.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
Let's see how it
think about it. What do you think? We don't have to decide right now.
And we can look through what information we'd have available at each presentation as well. That might kind of guide that.
Okay, thanks to everybody for thinking about that. So now we're at the opportunity for the second opportunity for communication from the public on all school district matters. Anybody, board reflections? Superintendent?
Can't wait for Friday emo. Friday night, looking forward to it. And no more snow, perhaps? Can people do a little?
Like your forecast.
Three back-to-back weekend storms, people.
Weekend storms.
Storms, not
That's right.
this.
That's key.
Get into Monday.
All right, so the board is actually going to convene into executive session for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations. So I move that we convene to executive session. May second, please. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.